Most people think police encounters are won or lost based on what rights you know. They're not. They're usually won or lost at one specific moment. The moment an officer presents something as a legal requirement when it's actually a voluntary choice. That's the decision point. Because once you mistake a request for a requirement, you start giving away information, consent, and control of the encounter without even realizing it. Let's look at 5 of the most common legal myths people fall for, and the exact phrase that keeps you from stepping into the trap. Imagine you're sitting at a traffic stop. The officer walks up to your window. Everything seems routine. Then he says, "Just answer a few questions for me. Seems harmless." If knowing your rights matters to you, subscribe now. Share this with someone who needs it, and drop your opinion below. But right now, the officer hasn't decided where this encounter is going. The next few seconds matter, and that's where most people make their biggest mistake. The first myth is, if you didn't do anything wrong, you should answer every question. You've probably heard that your entire life, maybe from friends, maybe from family, maybe even from officers. The problem is that answering questions and being innocent are not the same thing. Officer, where are you headed tonight? Driver, just going home. Officer, where are you coming from? Driver, my friend's house. Officer, had anything to drink? Driver, just one beer. Now the encounter has changed. The driver thought he was being cooperative. The officer just received new information. That's why officers ask questions. Not because they're making conversation, because they're gathering facts. Every answer creates another avenue for investigation. The trap isn't the question. The trap is believing you're required to answer it, and that leads directly to the decision point. The moment you assume a voluntary conversation is mandatory, the exact response is simple. Officer, I'd prefer not to answer questions. That's it. Short, polite, easy to remember. Officer, I'd prefer not to answer questions. Now let's look at myth number 2. Refusing questions makes you look guilty. This one scares people. Officer, why won't you answer? Driver, I don't know. Now the driver starts explaining, defending, justifying, talking, and every word creates more information. The reality is that exercising a legal right is not evidence of a crime. Officers may continue asking questions. That's normal. They may seem surprised. That's normal too. But the encounter changes when people start talking themselves out of an uncomfortable silence. Officer, so you won't tell me where you're coming from? Driver, officer, I'd prefer not to answer questions. Notice what's missing. No argument, no debate, no lecture, no hostility. Just the same phrase, again and again. Now, myth number 3. If you cooperate with a search, the officer will let you go. This is one of the biggest traps in traffic stops. Officer, you don't mind if I take a quick look, do you? People hear, if I agree, this will end faster. But officers ask for consent searches because consent can provide legal authority that didn't previously exist. The key word is consent. If the officer already had legal authority to search, he usually wouldn't need your permission. Watch the decision point. Officer, you don't mind if I search your car? Wrong response. Sure, go ahead. The encounter immediately changes. Now compare it. Officer, you don't mind if I search your car? Driver, I do not consent to any searches. Simple, clear, professional, no argument, no accusation. No attitude, just clarity. The officer may continue asking. The officer may try a different approach. But the decision point has already passed. You recognize the request for what it was. A request, not a command. Now, myth number 4. You have to explain yourself. This happens constantly. Officer, why are you nervous? Officer, why are you refusing? Officer, what are you hiding? Most people immediately begin defending themselves. Driver, I'm not hiding anything. Driver, I'm just nervous. Driver, I've never been stopped before. Again, more information, more statements, more things that can be interpreted, more investigation. The officer's objective is often simple. Keep the conversation going. Keep information flowing. The mistake is believing every question deserves an explanation. The better approach is consistency. Officer, what are you hiding? Driver, officer, I'd prefer not to answer questions. Officer, why not? Driver, officer, I'd prefer not to answer questions. Notice how powerful that becomes. Because the conversation stops generating new information, and that's exactly what changes the dynamic. Now, myth number 5. The officer wouldn't ask if you had a choice. This is probably the most important myth of all. People assume authority automatically means obligation, but police encounters contain different kinds of statements, commands, requests, questions, and confusing those categories creates problems. Officer, can I search your vehicle? That's a request. Officer, where are you headed? That's a question. Officer, hand me your license. That's a command during a lawful traffic stop. Understanding the difference is critical, because the biggest mistake drivers make is treating every request like a command. And that brings us back to the decision point. The encounter changes the moment you stop asking yourself, do I have to? And start assuming I must. That's when people surrender information they never intended to provide. Let's talk about what usually happens next. Many viewers worry that officers will become upset. Sometimes they may push back. You might hear, Officer, why won't you answer? Officer, if you've done nothing wrong, what's the problem? Officer, are you hiding something? These are pressure points. They're designed to keep the conversation moving. Your job is not to win an argument. Your job is to stay consistent. Officer, why won't you answer? Driver, officer, I'd prefer not to answer questions. Officer, are you refusing? Driver, officer, I'd prefer not to answer questions. Notice the pattern. No escalation, no hostility, no debate, just consistency. Legally, the principle behind all of this is simple. The Constitution generally protects people from being compelled to provide information beyond what the law specifically requires during many police encounters. That's why courts often focus on whether a person voluntarily provided information or voluntarily gave consent. The key word is voluntary, and that's exactly why officers ask, because voluntary cooperation can legally matter, which is why recognizing the decision point matters so much. Not because you're trying to be difficult, not because you're trying to hide something, but because understanding the difference between a request and a requirement changes everything. So let's recap. The trap isn't a complicated legal doctrine. The trap is believing every question requires an answer. The trap is believing every request is a command. The decision point occurs the instant an officer presents a voluntary choice, and you mistakenly treat it as mandatory. And the phrase to remember is, Officer, I'd prefer not to answer questions. Short, polite, easy to remember. Use it consistently, use it calmly, use it professionally, because the smartest drivers aren't the ones who talk the most. They're the ones who recognize the decision point before the officer does.